Welcome to those of you who are joining us. We'll begin momentarily. All right, everyone. Well, welcome to DMCNY's Midweek Recharge. Today, we're going to discuss how to retain customers' loyalty as businesses, lockdowns start to ease from post-COVID. We're also going to talk about dealing with a lot of the unrest that is happening right now and how to deal with that as a brand. So, before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank DMCNY's annual sponsors, whose generous support makes events like these possible. So thank you so much to our gold sponsors, Wyland, Experian, and Alliant, and also to our bronze sponsors, BMI Global, OMS, Japs Olson, and Epsilon. Of course, a bit of housekeeping. All of the attendees will remain on mute throughout the presentation. So if you have a question, just go ahead and type it into the Q&A box at any time throughout the presentation. I'll be keeping an eye out and asking questions during as well as at the end of the presentation. If you have any technical difficulties, please use the chat box for that. And so thanks again for joining us. I'm so excited to introduce Deb Gabor, who's joining us today as our speaker. Deb is CEO of brand strategy consultancy Soul Marketing. She's also an expert in brand strategy and crisis strategy. I love this. Deb is a self-proclaimed brand dominatrix. So watch out because she knows what's going on. She's going to tell you what to do about it. She's also the author of Branding is Sex and Irrational Loyalty, which I just happen to have a copy of. And it's, I'm not, I have to show it because I was organizing my bookshelf this weekend and I came across it and I was like, small world moment. I didn't even realize that I had it. I had looked at my bookshelf for a little while. So I'm so excited about that. So as you know, Deb is going to provide her advice on communicating in ways that shows customers that you value them. And through determining what they expect at this time, and then working with influencers in ways that will support and not detract from customer loyalty at this time when we have two concurrent era-defining crises. So Deb, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. And I'm glad you have a copy of my book.
Yeah, I'm excited. So, because I started it and didn't finish it, so now I have.
Now you have to finish it. And Irrational Loyalty: Building a Brand That Thrives in Turbulent Times. It's as if I predicted what's going on right now, because it really tells the story of why some brands are able to endure crises and why some are not, by looking at real life brand examples. And I think we're living a lot of those things right now, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, over this past weekend, I watched The Untouchables, and there's a line in there. Sean Connery says to Kevin Costner, "What are you prepared to do?" And I thought that resonates so much right now. So what do you think, Deb, is the main brand-related crisis that B2C businesses could face as they start to open up, and also as we're facing these dual crises?
Yeah, that's, if you had asked me, I don't know, a week ago, what is the big crisis facing brands right now? I would say that it's the opening up again, bringing people back into your businesses, especially if you've had a business that people really couldn't use during this time, bringing employees back to work, because it was kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario in terms of how you show up. Now we've layered on something that seems to be even more significant. The really interesting thing, if we roll back the clock a week ago, it was, we're all in this together, right?
Right.
Now the message is we are not all in this together, right? And that in itself, just like that phenomenon, is something that makes this time so complicated and so brand defining. So I think about like going back to the first part of that, which is the how do you open up? How do you get people back to work? How do you get people back into your retail establishment or your restaurant or your bar or your hair salon or whatever that may be? How you do that is going to define how your brand is perceived by many, many people, probably across the span of your brand. We've had a preview of that. I'm in Austin, Texas. So we've had a preview of what's coming for people on the East Coast, because we started opening up businesses here, maybe in an ill-advised way, but we started opening up businesses here at the beginning of May. And what I've actually seen, the brands that are doing a good job of navigating this difficulty right now, specific to the opening up scenario, are the ones that are doing a couple of things. One is they are really putting the employee experience first. This is really, really interesting. And it seems to be a trend across a lot of the businesses that I'm seeing, that I work with, that I'm talking to through, doing these different events and things like that. So this employee first mentality, and that serves these businesses in two important brand related ways. One is cared for people, care for people, right? So that's one aspect of it. And knowing that you have created a safe, healthy, confidence building environment for your employees increases the confidence level of your customers, right?
Right.
And here's a really, really good example. I'm going to give you two good examples, and then I want to talk a little bit about like what I'm doing to bring people back to the office, because I'm trying to do it in a very deliberate and thoughtful way that is going to not just ensure that I survive this time with my employees and my customers, but also that we're able to thrive. So first example is one of the little beauty things that I like, that I have done for a really long time. I love eyelash extensions, and I have a favorite salon that I go to here in Austin. And of course, when we shut down, I had just gotten a new set of lashes and whatever. And then gradually over time, they were starting to fall off, right? But there was no sign of the salon opening. They did something really great, which is like during the time that people couldn't use the service, they bridged the gap with content. So they asked themselves, how can we be indispensable to our clients at this time? And they shared really useful content like how to remove your eyelash extensions at home without blinding yourself, right? Using household products that are safe. Makeup tutorials that they were sharing that were how to do eye makeup for your Zoom call where you look like you have eyelash extensions. Here are the best lash building mascaras, et cetera, et cetera. So they bridge the gap with content. And now at a time where salons are opening up, they've been communicating with their customers, with their own community by saying, we're going to open up on this date. We know that you're really disappointed that you can't get in here yet, but we're working really hard to ensure that our employees have a safe environment to come back to. And that's going to ensure that you have one. And as a result, my disappointment in not being able to go is sort of alleviated, right?
Right.
I have this irrational loyalty to these people, to this business. I have this connection that transcends whatever's going on. And I was inspired by what they did to think about my own business. How do I want to bring people back to work? And so one of the really interesting things that I'm doing, because I'm thinking about this, like this is a moment for the brand. I want to do everything in a way that goes with my core values as an organization, that is on brand for our values and beliefs as a business, and really, really speaks to our relationship with our employees and our clients. So I think this is a clever idea, and anybody who wants to copy this, I think, more power to you. I got in touch with a concierge medicine practice here in Austin that works with our insurance. And I have medical professionals going to every one of my employees' homes to administer a test to them, a COVID test. in their homes in a safe way, with PPE. So not a home test kit, but we're actually sending a medical professional because it builds confidence. It's gonna, that, the employees can ask whatever questions they want to. And then I'm planning on opening the office starting on June the 15th. And if you want to come to the office, it's voluntary. If you don't feel like you're ready and you don't want to come back, you don't have to, but you let me know by the end of the week of June 8th that you want to come back, and we'll get you the test, and pending those results, we can make a decision about coming back, and we'll structure the alternating schedule so that we can maintain 6-foot distance. I'm providing the PPE for everybody. I'm providing extra hand sanitizer, all that kind of stuff. And the gratitude that the employees are feeling, that's going to translate to the relationships that we have with our clients. So, if you don't go back to work in the right way, you could damage your brand indelibly. Like the bar in Austin, that the first night that they were open, they had a ginormous crowd of people that were all face to face and shoulder to shoulder, and a picture is worth 1,000 words. And that photograph went out all over the internet, not just in Texas, but nationwide. And all of a sudden, they're thrust into the middle of the court of public opinion.
Absolutely. You're talking about employees, and I've noticed that, a lot of emails from big brands are talking about not just what they're doing for their customers, but also what they're doing for employees. So, of course, most of the companies that are really speaking out the loudest are B2C companies. What about B2B companies in this environment?
I think this idea of being able to engender irrational loyalty transcends both B2B, B2C. It doesn't matter if you're selling products or you're selling services. I think that the employee message is also important, because a brand is a set of values and beliefs, and it's like a magnet, and that brand is designed to attract to it people who share similar values and beliefs. And when you think about, for B2B organizations, they are still human beings behind the decisions that get made to buy software, to buy hardware, to buy professional services, all of those different things. And it's important to remember that people buy things from people. And this brand relationship is something that transcends the functional benefits of whatever it is that you're selling. I think it's as important for B2B organizations to be very, very clear with their customers, what they're doing. I mean, I have clients who come and visit us at the office, and then I have clients who we've never even met them in person, right? We've always had a long distance relationship. I want to know what the vendors that I work with are doing. Like I want to know what they're doing. I want to be inspired with confidence in that relationship. And if I can see that they're doing something above and beyond, that actually might be interesting to me, from a thought leadership perspective, or just, giving me ideas. Now, that's not to say that every B2B organization needs to send an email out to the entire world that says, this is what we're doing for our employees. It's not necessary, but if I would say it's like a baseline requirement, sort of. If, let's say, for instance, the hospitality industry, you're going to go stay in a hotel, it's now a baseline requirement that you need to hear, this is our cleaning protocol. You never needed to hear that before, right? But you need to hear that today. So it's really understanding, what are the baseline requirements that people need to have in order to feel confident in doing business with your business. And so it definitely applies to B2B brands.
One of the things that you were talking about yesterday when we briefly chatted to prep for today was about brands being human or human-like. And I thought that's interesting, because one of the things that brands need to do today is show that they value customers, not just as, the next thing that they can buy, but, them as people over just the profit that they bring. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Brands really are like people. And this idea that brands are like people, it's not new, but it's really, really picked up steam, during this COVID time. Because human beings, we've been fundamentally changed by this experience. Like there's not a single person on this planet who hasn't been affected by this in some way. And your customers are fundamentally changed, whether you're serving other businesses or you're serving consumers. And it takes a deep amount of humanization and, you know, sort of human intellect and emotional, like the EQ, the softer side of things, to understand exactly what people are going through. And so over the trajectory of communication throughout this COVID time, a lot of the things that I've been talking about with clients and with marketing organizations and stuff is that now is a time to focus on your own community. Right? Really focus on your own community, being your existing customers, your employees, the families of your employees, the physical geography in which you do business, your social media followers, fans of your brand, all of that. Like really, really focus on them and listen to them and understand. And when you bring them together and treat them as a community, they lean forward and they tell you what they want to buy from you, because now is not a time to be pushing things on people, right? I mean, we've all seen, I was watching regular television last night and I saw one of these advertisements for like a local car dealership where they were sort of making light of the situation that we're all wearing masks and using hand sanitizer, and they seemed to portray it in this like really I think they were trying to be lighthearted, but it just was coming across as just offensive and tone deaf. And so only another human being is going to be able to have the EQ to understand, like, where is the line? You know, when am I crossing it? What do I need to say? And more importantly, what do I need to do as a brand in order to let those people know that we're in this relationship together? Right. And I write in Irrational Loyalty about this relationship, right? It's like, irrational loyalty is the feeling that you're so bonded to a brand that you'd feel like you were cheating on it if you were to choose an alternative. It's how I feel about my iPhone. My coworker who uses an Android phone, every time I see his green text bubbles, I'm like, gross. Right. I tried a Samsung Galaxy S whatever one time and I felt like I was cheating on Apple. And so that's irrational loyalty. Irrational loyalty is the thing that transcends the product and it transcends the service and the functional benefits. Now is a time where you have to build that irrational loyalty. And it's like an interpersonal relationship, like you and your partner or me and my partner or whatever. Every time he does something for me that is in accordance with our shared values, he makes a positive deposit into our emotional bank account. That way, he's always on the positive side. So when he leaves his socks on the floor of the bathroom or he loads the dishwasher with the fork tines pointing down, which they go up, everybody, then I'm not throwing him out, right? I'm not throwing him out on his ass. And so that's why like brands are people, because you're in a relationship with your customers, and then your customers are in a relationship with you. And every time you behave in a way that's on expectation and on brand for the shared values you have with that brand, it deposits into your emotional bank account together. And the higher that emotional bank account is, the more able you are to withstand the crises and the turbulence.
So speaking of customer expectations, obviously it's important to understand your customers' expectations. How much should businesses be considering their customers' expectations right now as they plan to roll back out as the COVID restrictions ease, and also all of the social issues that they need to deal with, related to what's going on right now?
So the best brands in the world are the ones who know their ideal customer very, very intimately. This concept of the ideal customer, I talk about it this way. The best brands in the world aim their brand at a singular archetypal ideal customer. You have segments, you have different businesses who buy your product, and you have different types of people who buy it. But when you build the brand, which is the articulation of the core DNA of the organization and the relationship you have with your customers, when you aim it at a singular ideal customer, and you know who that person is intimately, like for my business, we have one of these, her name is Lindsay, and her profile is based on the amalgamation of like the profiles of our 3 best clients we've ever had as a business. We have a picture of her, you know, where, for instance, she's a really good listener, so she has big ears. She can always find extra budget when we come up with an innovative idea. So she's holding a golden shovel. She's very results oriented. So she's surrounded by charts, et cetera, et cetera. We know what her values and beliefs are. We know innately what she expects of us, right? And so when brands are thinking about either how do I open, how do we get people back to work, what do we say, what do we do, or how do I show up right now in support of the Black community, they think about who this ideal customer is and what this ideal customer would expect of them. The best brands in the world know this, right? And you can only know this if you do the work to figure out who this person is, who your brand is most made for. Like, who is the champion for your brand? Who is the North Star? This goes well beyond what we think about in marketing as like a customer avatar or a persona. It truly is an archetype. It is all of the best characteristics of the best customer that you're aiming your brand at. And if you know that, then all of these decisions about, you know, whether you were going to turn all of your company social media profiles Black yesterday and then make a donation to somebody, or you were like some of the brands that I patronize, I've actually been getting communications directly from their CEOs that are saying, like, this is what we will tolerate. This is what we won't tolerate. You know, we are here for our Black members, our Black customers, our Black employees. Here is what we are doing here. So when you make decisions about how you're going to behave, you have to do it through the lens of knowing who that ideal customer is and what would that person do, right? Ultimately, how would that person act? I mean, yesterday when we were, you know, as a company trying to figure out, like, what do we want our response to be? We thought about, what is our ideal customer expecting of us? You know, how do we use the platform of our brand to bond with and support that ideal customer really in her mission, right? So that's kind of the key. It's a basic fundamental of brand strategy. And I recommend that brands, if you don't know who this person is, now is the time to really figure out who that person is and what that profile is, and get your team together, if not your leadership team, but your marketing team, or if you're in an agency, you know, you can lead this with your clients to actually create this profile. And it's like, who is this person? Give them a name, give them a gender, give them an age, dress them. Do they wear gym shoes? Do they wear work boots? Are they wearing stilettos, or are they wearing no shoes like most of us right now working at home? You know, where do they go on vacation? What are their hopes, dreams, fears, desires? What do they measure themselves on? When you know all of these things, you know how those people are going to show up in a crisis, or how those people are going to show up in support of a community that is being abused, right?
Right.
And so that's the best advice that I can give brands. I can't tell you whether it's good for your brand to stand up or it's not good for your brand to stand up. I can tell you what's good for your brand is to figure out, what does your ideal customer expect you to do, and what is on brand for you. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. Absolutely. What about your competitors? You know, there's a lot around positioning. And so if your competitors are doing X or Y, is it relevant to you, or is it just about your business and your customers?
I think competition is always relevant, because knowing how to be positioned vis-a-vis both your direct competition as well as your conceptual competition is something that like helps you keep your edge as a brand. One of the things that I've seen through this COVID period is a lot of brands who didn't know how to show up or didn't know what to say. And those were the brands that were that were following everybody else's leads. You probably noticed it, like you saw it in your email inbox when you received 752 emails that were all entitled "A Letter from Our CEO," hashtag "We're all in this together." And they say things like, dear customer that you didn't even know we had your email address. You might have bought something from us 7 years ago, but we're emailing you to let you know that we're here for you. Should you need a new machete, a flower pot, a new Aston Martin, we're here for you. And oh, by the way, we're also here for our employees, which you didn't even know existed up until this point, right? So that was, that was brands like not knowing, how to show up. And so they were doing exactly what the competition was doing. We see the same thing happening with television advertising right now, where there's basically one advertisement and it's like 8 to 10 companies that are they're all rolling it right now, and they're virtually indistinguishable from one another. Leadership requires that you acknowledge who your competition is and you separate yourself from them. I always talk about legendary brands being the ones that are not just different, but the ones that are truly unique. That requires you to understand what is the conceptual space that we occupy among this full array of choices that our ideal customer has, and how can we position ourselves in a way that is unique and singular and ownable by us. And so that requires you to understand your competition, and brands that have clarity about what is singular about them and what is unique and ownable and the core DNA blueprint of their brand. And they are confident and consistent in communicating that. They're the ones who peel away from the competition. They're the ones that the rest of the competition is comparing themselves to. Right? And it all relies on making sure that you know who your ideal customer is, because customers don't buy you for the overt things that you do. Customers often buy you for this hidden reason that you don't know, right? They buy you, I run a marketing agency. Like my biggest competitor, the person we're always neck and neck in the like women-owned business list in our local business journal all the time. Her office is directly across the street from me. I look at her sign every day, but I know we're not competitors because people hire her when they're challenger brands and they're really looking to maintain their number 2 status in the industry. They're just looking to maintain. People hire my firm when they need a kick in the ass. Like if they really are trying to do something transformative, they're trying to take on a new market, they're opening up new markets. Maybe they have product launch. They've recently had an infusion of cash from investors, private equity, new CEO, new CMO, whatever. I know that people are hiring us, that we both do marketing services. If you look at our websites, it's virtually the same. But the underlying reason, the hidden reason, the one thing that they hire us for that they don't get from her is the kick in the pants, right? So I think competition is important. And, the big takeaway about that is just because everyone else is doing it doesn't mean that you have to.
Yeah.
People are looking for brands to lead right now in a lack of leadership, in a vacuum of take it to the bank, true and decisive communication on the part of the people who are supposed to be leading. People are searching for leadership and they're looking for it from your brand.
Yeah, that's so true. So you mentioned all of the lookalike communications, and a lot of brands are using these communications to say what they're doing in terms of their post-COVID rollouts. They're using them, of course, now to address all of the racial injustice that's happening. Some of the companies, because many of them are taking, like you said, virtually the same approach, are getting called out on social media. For example, L'Oreal. How should a business respond in this situation?
That's a crisis, right? If you're getting called out, I think that these brands that are having these missteps, in most cases, they're unintentional, right? They've been thrust into an unfortunate situation. They made some bad decisions because they were trying to act quickly. They're getting called out for being thrown, into the middle of this. This is another damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario, sort of like people going back to work after COVID. When a brand gets, when a brand is involved in a crisis, whether it's a crisis of their own creation, and by gum, we have seen so many brands like create their own disasters, right? Or the crisis is something that's not of your creation, or it's because of an unlucky association. And I can think of examples of all of these different things. Regardless of where the crisis comes from, the rules of crisis communication always apply. And good crisis communication, good crisis response requires a couple things. First, acknowledge humanity, right? Acknowledge humanity and take responsibility, and do it not in a passive way, but in an active way. So that means we are sorry. So apologize. We are sorry. We did this, not this was done to these people by us. Like it seems subtle, but it's a massive difference when you are like, we did this thing and we are deeply sorry. We behaved badly. We made a mistake. We take full responsibility for it. And our hearts, and in some cases our money, go out to the people that we impacted as a result of what we did, right? So take responsibility, communicate in an active way, own the conversation. Second thing that I always advise that brands do in a crisis, if they want to make it right, and they should want to make it right, again, through the lens of the ideal customer, they should say, and here is what we are going to do to ensure that we help the people that we impacted as a result of this, and we also make sure that it never happens again. Here is our plan, right? Communicate that plan. Own the narrative around your brand, right? This is what we're going to do. Also, communicate when are you going to reach back out to the world and talk about, here's where we are in this plan. And then what are you going to do when you've completed? How will you know that you finished? How will you measure your success, right? And this is the way that brands that step in a pile of whatever and get it on the back of their shoe, this is the way that brands are able to endure this kind of turbulence. So if you have solid standing, that if you have previously done a good job of aligning your values and beliefs with your ideal customer's values and beliefs, and you've mostly behaved in an above board, on expectation, honorable way as a brand, and you have a misstep like this and you handle it appropriately, most brands are able to endure that. But that is, they have to take responsibility. They have to act quickly. They have to control the narrative around the brand and not let the public drive that conversation, right? Mm-hmm. The most recent example that I saw of this would be like the PPP loan give back drama of, I mean, it seems like it was a year ago, but it was last month, right? It was it was in May, when Ruth's Chris Steakhouse and Shake Shack, Danny Meyer's Union Square Restaurant Group, both of them had received not PPP loans, but they had received money through the CARES Act, right? It wasn't a loophole, but it was something that, Congress decided that hospitality businesses should, because it's the backbone of the American economy, that they should qualify for this money. Well, there was this sentiment of big business stole our PPP money, right? It was hard. I was a person who got boxed out of PPP money in the first round. And, it was heart-wrenching and terrible for a lot of people. You had two brands who were in exactly the same situation, who behaved in completely different ways, right? You had Ruth's Chris, who didn't say anything for 72 hours. They were noticeably absent from any conversation about that. On the flip side, you have a brand that Danny Meyer's, his brand, Shake Shack, all of his brands are built on a really solid foundation, like a really solid brand foundation. Everybody knows what those brands stand for, don't they? It's very, very clear, especially people in New York, right? That, they really own that brand. And so when they made a move pretty much immediately, like within 24 hours, to give back the money, there wasn't even a mechanism to return the money, if you remember, right? If I look at those two brands and I think about which brand is going to is going to thrive in the post-pandemic world, it's not Ruth's Chris. No offense to Ruth's Chris, but you have to own the conversation around your brand, because the conversation that ensued, because they were noticeably absent from it, was people were unfortunately saddling them with a very, very negative brand perception. So I think that's a really good case of how brands can handle a disaster and do it in a way that is, true to their brand. Shake Shack, great example, because it has a very solid, consistent, and clear brand foundation to go from.
So speaking of these online conversations, obviously influencers have a lot to say about everything going on right now, especially brands' actions. What should brands be thinking about in terms of influencers?
Again, this goes back to the ideal customer, right? If you know who your ideal customer is, you know who are the influencers who actually have influence over your ideal customers, right? In some cases, there are influencers that unfortunately have undue and outsized influence, right? And it's really important to know who those people are and treat them in a way that makes sense for your brand. But overall, from an influencer strategy perspective for brands, really understanding whose influence is my ideal customer going to discount versus whose influence actually has influence. And influence, the whole idea of influencer strategy is to use influencers to influence the influencers, right? Ultimately being a channel for the brand. And so influencers have to be an extension of the brand. Also, when you're thinking about who are the influencers that you want to carry your positive message out to the world, make sure that those influencers are on brand for you. And when they show up online, offline, whatever, that they are the influencers who are aligned with your brand. Because we've seen some of these issues with brands where the influencers that they've chosen have like gone rogue and just done their own thing. And you're like, oh, holy crap. One influencer that's off brand for your brand, not aligned with your values as a brand, can take down your whole brand, right?
Yeah, definitely. So I just want to remind everyone who's with us, if you have any questions, just type them in that Q&A box. So just to go back, the pros and cons of working with influencers at this time.
The pros of working with influencers is like they sometimes can give you access to an audience that you otherwise may have trouble getting to through other means. Influencers also go to, when you think about the purchase influence life cycle, whether it's a product or a service, and influencers are important mostly in the consumer world, but we also see them in the business world through, thought leaders and media and analysts and, people like that. The influencers impact in the purchase influence life cycle. People have to become aware of something and they form an opinion of it. They have an image of it that's positive, negative, the perceptions, does it hit on the attributes I want? That really sort of is part of the awareness conversation. Consideration is like, of the average of 2.3 or so brands that I can consider in any purchase decision, it comes down to this one and this one. And then finally, there's the purchase part of that process. Influencers really help with the consideration set and they help with awareness. But the interesting thing is, if you have the right influencers who can, you're already aware of something. If you have the right influencer who can wield their influence to be the third party recommender or approver of a particular brand move, it immediately, it can help you get into the consideration set and then have a better chance of being purchased. So influencer strategy, when done right, whether with micro influencers or, with celebrity influencers like Kardashians and Kanye West and people like that, if it's appropriate for your brand. Influencer strategy, when done right, can have a real impact on the brand and it helps cut through the noise. It helps give your brand the halo of association with somebody that your target audience admires. The risks of that are, the same, right? That you have this person that they're their own human being, they're their own brand. And you as a product or a service or a brand are kind of beholden to whatever decisions and whatever whims are driving their behavior on on that day. And so, you have to weigh the risks and rewards. Again, if you have a very solid foundation for your brand strategy and you are very clear on your core brand DNA and how that infiltrates the values and beliefs of your ideal customer, it helps you make decisions about who those influencers are and how you want to leverage their relationships to take a product to market. Is that what you were looking for? I want to make sure I answer that question appropriately.
Yeah, definitely. So one question that came in, as we're sending out promotions, should we be discounting? Or should we hold tight?
That's really interesting. I've been getting this question a lot. It's a really hard time for people financially. We want to do something nice for them. Should we be discounting? And my answer to that is discounting should never be the first choice. I'm actually recommending to clients, just pretty much across the board, no discounting. What I'm recommending to clients is to add value to the relationship. So, when you think about discounting, now is not the time to put into a customer's mind that you are anything other than indispensable. If your goal as a brand is to create that bond of irrational loyalty, price shouldn't matter. And so I have been advising clients and brands to take this approach of really understanding what their customers' challenges are. What are their challenges and needs, and what's on their mind? What are they thinking about? And then think about what are things that you can do as a brand that don't require you to buy anything, make anything new, hire any new people, but things that are within your core competencies that you can do, that you can offer to your clients for free. So your clients or your customers, and then package that up and go out to your customers and say, we know that this is a really hard time for you, and we value your relationship. We know that you're struggling. We feel for you, and we want to give you something. There's never been a better time in history to give generously of your expertise and your services and your products. Here's something extra that we're doing. Here's more cookies, right? For right now, we're putting 18 cookies in a bag instead of 12. Here's an extra little lanyard that we're giving you, right? With every purchase, we're giving you this thing because we just value you so much, right? It's a much better way to not just maintain the perceived value of the brand, but also to increase the value, right? Wow, this brand really helped me out during this time. Those little lanyards, those extras were so helpful to me. This is so incredible a strategy, especially for B2B brands, right? And the first piece is figure out what can you offer people? This is great for services organizations. What are the little extras that you can offer people? What are 3 things? Package them up, go to your customers, say, this is what we are doing for our customers at this time to help them, right? And then contact your customers, pick up the phone and call them. This is what we're doing for people right now, right? I've talked to so many businesses who haven't even called their customers. We had one client that has, they're a software vendor, a SaaS-based software vendor with 350 business-to-business clients. They were like, what should we do right now? We have customer success people who are sitting around because we're not onboarding new clients. I said, have every one of them pick up the phone and call every customer you have. They did that. And in a 72-hour period, they reached 45% of those people live on the first try. So there's never been a better time to reach out. And if you don't know what to say, give them something, right? So no discounting, add value. And then, the third piece of that is make sure that you're communicating with authority using the platforms that you already are using. Communicate with authority, share information that's of value to people that isn't selling your product or selling your goods, going all the way back to this little eyelash extension studio here in Austin, Texas, that's adding value to my life by sharing valuable information, thought leadership if you will, on a very, very small scale, it increases their value to me as a brand. So it really is all about that relationship.
Right. Great.
So no discounting. Please don't discount.
I agree. Another question that came in, do you recommend that brands refrain from proactively engaging sensitive social issues like this week's racial tension? Second part of that question, there's no upside for a brand to initiate a dialogue, right?
Depends on the brand, right? I think about brands that like immediately throw themselves into the conversation. Go back, rewind the clock, and think about that Nike Colin Kaepernick ad. You guys remember that, right? It got middle-aged fat guys from Iowa really, really riled up and had them burning their Nikes in effigy in videos on Twitter, if you remember, right? But that was a mic drop moment for that brand. They started the conversation, right? And it was, I'm guaranteeing you that it was very, very well thought out. And they did what we're talking about, which is understanding who is our ideal customer and what would they expect of us, right? So the answer to that is it may not make sense for your brand to get into the fight, whatever fight that is. We've seen many brands show up and start a dialogue. Let's say Dick's Sporting Goods about gun control. Let's say all of those brands going back to the beginning of the Trump presidency when he started up all those business councils. And then, we had the Charlottesville situation there. And there were many brands that like backed away and were extremely vocal in saying like, we're not going to throw our support towards a president that is, blatantly discriminating against Black people and is advocating for white supremacy with his words, right? So it may make sense for your brand. It may not make sense for your brand. If you have a brand that serves people in a very, very general way, it may not make sense. But then I look at Target. Target's really interesting. That's a mass market brand. That's been an interesting case study, and I will be interested to see like long-term how that impacts the brand. But they very much they were one of the first to take a stand on this. They were like, right? And closing down stores and all of that. That was a major, major risk for that brand. I have a feeling that is going to bond a lot of people very strongly to that brand. People who were previously Target loyalists who are aligned with that is probably going to draw more people in and make them feel even closer to that brand. My daughter, a 22-year-old, she was like, yay, Target, look at this. And I'm like, you're not their target audience, but she's going to be a brand loyalist forever because they stood up for something that she wholeheartedly believes in. So I don't agree that there's no upside. What I would caution brands about doing when they want to either start or get into a conversation because it's important to them as a brand and it's aligned with their core values and it's aligned with their customers' core values is they must do it in a very authentic and sincere way, because people are very smart and they can see through the BS, right? They know when you're co-opting a bad situation to get attention for your brand. Like consumers are smarter than they've ever been. And I think it's so important, this authenticity. So it's not just what you say. And what I mean by authenticity with regard to brand, I always refer to it this way. It's not just what you say, it's what you do. How your brand shows up and how it behaves at this time is going to define your brand forever. Which side of history do you want to be on? And is it for your brand to be in this conversation? Maybe it's not for your brand to be in this conversation, but you have to decide that based on what are the values of your brand.
Yeah, absolutely. As Sean Connery said,
question asker that I answered that question. Okay.
Yeah. As Sean Connery said, what are you prepared to do?
Yes, 100%. That's a very, very apropos quote.
Yeah, definitely. So, any final advice for companies to think about as they, reopen and also, address or not address the racial injustice discussions that are happening?
Yeah. I'm going to start kind of general and say, like, there's never been a better time for you to really, really examine and reinforce the strategic foundation of your brand. Now is the time to look at that while we're going through this turbulence. So because people ask me, like, is this a good time to be thinking about branding? Branding is an always on activity, right? And the brand is owned at the top of the company, and it is delivered by everyone in the company. So 100% you have to be thinking about that. Final words of advice would be, make sure that you understand your ideal customer and how you can be indispensable to them and how you can align with their values and beliefs at this time. Other interesting things that I'm seeing, don't discount, add value, increase the value of those relationships. Pick up the phone and call customers. If you have a consumer facing business where that's not appropriate, how else can you get to them by providing them value over and above what they would normally get from you? Especially if you're the kind of brand that they can't use right now, how can you increase the value that you deliver to them to kind of bridge that gap when they can't use your product, because they'll be the first ones in the door when they can. Another thing that's really surprising, there's never been a better time in at least recent history for sending people things in print and through the mail. I think this is an amazing time for direct marketing. I put on heels to go to my mailbox. I'm so excited about what's in there right now. You know what I mean? And so, like, I've been talking to a lot of clients about, like, what can you do to get people's attention? That example that I gave, the software company that smiled and dialed for 72 hours and reached 45% of their customers live on the first try. This is the time to do stuff like that. I'm a purchase influencer. I'm the CEO. I make buying decisions for my company. How I spend my time most of the time in a regular year, I'm traveling all over the world doing speaking engagements. For the next 7 months, I'm here. This is my bedroom. This is where I spend this 6-foot square. Actually, it's 4x6 because I'm on a little rug. I can see my bed from here. I have a very small life. If you call me on the phone, because I live on freaking Zoom, I'm like, who's calling me on the phone? I want to have a phone conversation. So, think about what are the new ways that you can get your customers' attention, because every human being, this goes all the way back to the very first thing I said, every human being has been fundamentally changed by this experience. Their big lives have become small lives. Their values are being fine-tuned and coming in much, much more clearly. You add on top of the pandemic, you add what is going on right now, Civil War 2.0, right? And we are wanting, some people want to be part of history, whichever way they go. And I know which way I hope people go. Brands are really, really going to be part of that. Like, when they write the history of what happened now, they're going to be saying, where did people get their leadership from? In many cases, it hasn't been from our leaders, right? We've been looking for leadership from people like, my employees right now are they're on a webinar with Mark Cuban. They're not watching me on this, that's for sure. They're watching Mark Cuban, but people are looking for leadership. They're like lifting up every rock that they can find, and your brand can provide that. So those would be my final thoughts on that.
Well, thank you, Deb. Thanks so much for all the great insight. I really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you. This was really fun. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thanks to everyone for attending. We'll see you next week, where we're going to talk about the evolution of and the opportunities around addressable television with people sitting home watching TV. This is really important. So join us. Will Clayton, who's SVP of Digital Products at Weiland, will be our speaker. And I just want to say thanks again for attending. Have a great rest of your evening.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.